Welcome back, my Psychians. Last video lecture on Unit 8, Part 1, and we are finishing up with personality disorders. I personally find personality disorders highly interesting, so I hope you guys find it interesting. Also, it definitely it's useful to know when you watch criminology shows and when you think of profiling. So for any of my little criminology psychologists out there, hopefully you'll find this interesting. So personality disorders, they are long-standing, non-flexible, so stable personality traits that impair social functioning. And it's a very big lens. And so they created 3 clusters of personality disorders. So the clusters have certain traits attached to them. So and we'll go through each of these clusters. So cluster A, they tend to exhibit odd or eccentric behavior. Cluster B tends to exhibit dramatic or emotional traits, where tends to be not similar to bipolar because it's not a personality disorder. Bipolar is, that's a mood. We're talking personality, but these are personality traits of emotional highs and lows. Cluster C is an exhibit of anxious or fearful behavior. So often people seek treatment at the insistence of others. People who have personality disorders are the hardest to treat because the individual themselves do not feel distressed by their condition, right? I mean, it's just part of their personality, right? They don't believe that there's anything wrong with them. So again, personality disorders, they are diagnosable, but are people going to seek treatment for them? That's a whole nother situation, okay? All right, let's start with cluster A. So cluster A, we have paranoid and schizoid. So, and these are personality disorders. So paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder. So paranoid is characterized as paranoia and persuasive, long-standing suspiciousness and generalized mistrust of others. So these are the dominant traits within their personality. Okay, so think of these as, again, personality traits, and this is within cluster A. And the paranoid is very, again, this is not caused by any drugs, right? So, we can have drug-induced paranoia or insomnia-induced paranoia. This is not from any of that. Then we have the schizoid personality disorder, and it's a pattern of indifference to social relationships with a limited range of emotional expression and experience. This disorder tends to manifest itself in early adulthood through social and emotional detachment that prevent people from having close relationships. This does feed into antisocial personality disorder, but again, this is again, it's categorized as, essentially, it's almost like you have no need to build any relationships, okay? Your brain is not reacting in the kind of mainstream way as it would for social relationships of others, where we find those really important. So that's called the schizoid personality disorder. So, moving on to cluster B. And cluster B is a lot. So remember, cluster B, and again, just looking at my notes, right? So this is the dramatic to emotional traits. So we don't really go into a lot of borderline personality disorder. It is different than bipolar, okay? Borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. Bipolar is a mood disorder, okay? Borderline personality disorder, I have talked to a couple of psychiatrists. We usually have a counselor come in and talk about these different types. What I have found and what my research has shown is that people who struggle with borderline personality disorder, they are the hardest to help. They are the hardest people to treat, and let's go over it. It's marked by an ongoing pattern of varying moods, self-image, and behavior. These symptoms often result in impulsive actions and in problems in relationships. Let me tell you the difference of bipolar. Bipolar is a mood disorder where they go steadily up and steadily down because it's dictated by the chemicals within our brain, right? So remember, it takes a while for hormones to go up and then to go down. People who have borderline personality disorder, all it takes is a second. You can be the best person they know, they love their therapist. You say one wrong thing, now they think you're the devil, they're not going to take their medication, they're going to go off of it. It's as quick as that. That is how quickly their moods change. Borderline personality disorder, the hardest to treat. Okay. Then we have the histrionic personality disorder, which is characterized by a pattern of excessive attention-seeking emotions, usually beginning in early adulthood, including inappropriate seductive behavior and excess need for approval. It's almost like they're fixated on social approval and they lack kind of the societal norms of sexual aggression. They will be all up in your business. They'll probably have inappropriate behavior at work. Again, excessive attention seeking, and they always have to be in the center of attention. Always. Okay. Then there's the narcissistic personality disorder. Fun fact, my friends, Ted Bundy had this disorder. Mwah! A narcissistic personality disorder is a long-term pattern of abnormal behavior characterized by your exaggerated feeling of self-importance and your excessive need for admiration. You need to take credit for everything you've done. So big serial killers and big people like BTK, all these really famous serial killers, how a lot of them got caught is because they needed to prove themselves that they were smarter than the police. It's a part of their narcissistic traits. They have to prove their dominance and the fact that they love the attention. So the Zodiac killer sent in all those things to the police because then they're all in riddles because he had this personality disorder that I'm smarter than you. Everyone needs to pay attention to me. I'm going to go down in history. Hitler also had narcissistic personality disorder. So again, this one's seen often. Ted Bundy, to the day that he got locked up, denied anything he did. That's why he almost got away with it. He was so convincing. And if you guys notice, the extreme lack of empathy. So if your minds are already going a mile a minute, psychopathy and sociopathy, are they connected to narcissistic personality disorder? Yes, they are, my friends. Okay, and then cluster C. We have, and this is the one, cluster C is very about, it's more anxious and fearful behavior. So there's avoidant personality disorder, which is characterized by feelings of extreme social inhibition, inadequacy, sensitivity of negative criticism. So essentially it's not agoraphobia, which is just the fear of social environment. This is a personality trait. Okay? This is a personality trait of you being extremely kind of aware of criticism, rejection, significant inabilities to maintain relationships in day-to-day life. So it's avoidant personality disorder. Okay, avoidant personality disorder. And then we have dependent personality disorder. And again, I just have my little notes over here, so ignore me while I just kind of scroll so I know where I'm at. Okay, so dependent personality disorder is characterized by an inability to be alone, developing symptoms of anxiety when they're not around others, and needing constant reassurance from others to function. Again, personality traits, but this also can form from a severe lack of attachment as a child, right? And then we have not OCD, but obsessive compulsive personality disorder, okay? OCD is its own disorder, but now we're focusing on personality traits that can be found within this lens. So it's characterized by a preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, mental and interpersonal control. So it's almost like your personality traits of OCD, but you usually don't have the behavioral needs. This is all within your personality traits within your mind. Okay, so again, very similar but different. Just one is right. So OCD is a different category of disorder, and this is the personality disorder within obsessive compulsive. So let's talk about one of my favorite antisocial personality disorders. So there's something called, and I hate to, and again, there's high correlations with APD with later on psychopathology. This has been called the baby serial killer gene. And I know how that sounds. Antisocial personality disorder, my friends, is genetic. And it is very common when you see it with younger children that they will grow up with psychopathic tendencies. Okay, so this is the most well-known personality disorder. Clinically, features of APD must include at least 3 of the following. A lack of conforming to laws. So usually they have so if children are kind of going towards this pathway, they also have oppositional defiance disorder, which means they have a very hard time being told what to do along with conforming to laws. Okay, and this is usually evident that in their child record, they usually have some repeated petty crimes. Some of those petty crimes are stealing, but also hurting animals, right? So these are kind of things we start to see. Repeated deceitfulness in relationships with others. They tend to be compulsive liars, okay? Such as lying, using false names, conning others for profit. Failure to think ahead, they tend to be impulsive. They do not have a very strong superego at all. Tendency for irritability, anger, and aggression. Their amygdala is very, again, genetically are shown their amygdala is bigger. And this is shown by repeatedly assaulting others or getting in frequent physical fights. And the really big one is disregarding for personal safety and the safety of others. They do not care if other people get hurt. Their frontal lobe is different, has a different structure than a mainstream brain. This is why this is usually accompanied with a psychopathic brain, because psychopaths are born genetically with brain abnormalities, which tend to lead to this disorder, while sociopaths tend to be made from their environment. And this disorder cannot be diagnosed until the age of 18, even though there is high correlations of this being in teenagehood. So again, but being diagnosed with APD, the individual must have shown the symptoms of diagnosis since the age of 15. Okay, so again, that time frame. Usually the individuals have been previously diagnosed with conduct disorder, right? Occurs more often in males and females. Sometimes we see these terms for sociopaths or psychopaths and related to APD, okay? And just a little bit more of understanding, and you don't have to. You can summarize this if you'd like, because the AP test doesn't really focus on this too much. But some studies suggest that there is a genetic predisposition, like I talked about, possible in the form of chronic underarousal of both autonomic and central nervous systems, which means they aren't being held as much as a baby, which leads to abnormally low anxiety, which may make people less sensitive to punishment. Other research has linked an underdeveloped amygdala. And that is the genetics behind this, right? Others believe that APD also has a nurture aspect, because remember, sociopaths are made through the environment, but some sociopaths have this APD diagnoses. So that environmental factors like a broken home, rejection by parents, poor discipline. So for example, Ted Bundy, if you guys haven't watched the videos of his kind of life yet, his mother that he never knew his father. Ted Bundy never knew his father. He was born and he thought that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. And then his sister, which was his mother, actually took him away a few years later to Washington and completely upended his life. Imagine that as a childhood crisis, my friends. Also, okay, we could go into Ted Bundy forever, but also listen to this: lack of attachment to early caregivers. My friends, this is the ripple effect that we were talking about, okay? And this could lead to antisocial tendencies. And a little bit on the genetic side, and again, I believe, let's see, make sure. Okay, one more slide after this. The understanding of APD is this a little bit, just to see what kind of our brains look like. A PET scan of 41 murderers revealed the reduced activity in the frontal lobes. And the follow-up study repeated offenders had 11% less frontal lobe compared with people who have normal brains. Okay. And last but not least, the two little avenues of anti-personality disorder. So note, because these occur in children, they are not and cannot be considered personality disorders, because remember, children are always growing, but these are branches of early on disorders that tend to have a high correlation that lead to APD. Conduct disorder, which is the repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior which the basic rights of others are violated, and these behaviors are often referred to antisocial behaviors, along with oppositional defiant, which is where it's a persistent pattern of anger, irritation, and defiance and vindictiveness towards parents and authority figures. Okay, so on that note, that's my last slide, but if you guys couldn't tell, this is what I love to study about. So again, take really good notes, and then you now can move on to the last little activity, which is in our next little Google slide activity. Okay, all right, my people, adios.